Welcome to the Seeing Red podcast with Andi Turner and Garrett Fools, checking up on Texas policies and politics with some federal issues thrown in, like the assault weapons ban, interest rate hikes, you get it, but it's mostly Texas, since we can't ignore the big stuff either. And now, here are your hosts, Andi Turner and Garrett Fools.
Welcome back to this week's edition of the Seeing Red podcast and YouTube, and we are delighted you are joining us. If you are new, welcome, and if you are returning, thank you so much. We are delighted to have you here. Please hit that subscribe button and smash that like button. It's really helpful to us to get the word out about the show and about what we're talking about and, all the things. So smash that subscribe, smash that like button, and turn
on notifications.
And notifications are great too. Yeah,
absolutely.
So you don't miss a single episode.
That way, you know right when we drop it, because like today's episode, we're recording this on Wednesday morning. We typically record it on Tuesday or Monday or Tuesday. And so it's going to drop later than usual. So if you want to know exactly when this podcast came out, when this YouTube video dropped, you want to turn on those notifications. But thank you so much for joining us today. Andi, did you see what Mark McCaig dropped this morning?
I did not. You were telling me a little before the show, but wow. It was quite the headline.
Let me show you this. Yeah. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
So we have HD 91 candidate. So HD 91 is in Tarrant County. It's represented by Stephanie Click, a candidate up there. He's run a couple times. This might be his second time running. Named David Lowe is, they're in a runoff. He was able to prevent Representative Click from getting into it. Well, he likes to run on his past record. He's a veteran. He's a former, maybe active, I don't know, a peace officer. But he's not actively a peace officer. He doesn't work actively for any police organization, to my knowledge.
Okay. He
got his job initially in Collin County, which right there in the DFW Metroplex. He apparently, according to records that Mark McCaig at the Texas Voice found, and I'm going through this right here on the site, he found that David Lowe was demoted in his first 10 weeks from a peace officer to a detention officer. And that's not necessarily a detention. Detention officers have to be, or often peace officers. But he also received a pay cut when he did that. And to date, he quickly left just the law enforcement field. By 2020, he was working for the Dallas GOP, and it was stated there that Mark interviewed or tried to get a comment from the Collin County sheriff, and the sheriff said, where is this? Under its current policies and standards, David O. Lowe is not eligible for rehire as a peace officer within the Collin County Sheriff's Office.
And that's pretty much all they can comment on from an HR perspective. They can say when he started work, when people call for references, when you started, how much you made, and when you left, and are you eligible for rehire? And it's usually not a good sign when the answer to are they eligible for rehire, when the answer is no, is not a good sign.
Yeah. So it's it's not a great sign. The next employer he had, Dallas GOP at the time, was chaired by Rodney Anderson, who was a former state rep out of Irving. He lost in the same election in the same area where Matt Rinaldi lost, which is kind of the Irving, West Dallas County area. But Anderson, won a few elections by like a fewer than 500 votes. I think a couple of them were lower than 200. He came out and just eviscerated Lowe. He's like, as county chairman, I was forced to confront him spreading mistruths about the county party. David Lowe's blatantly false information was damaging to party efforts, and now he has moved to Tarrant County to run for office. It saddens me to see him using the same tactics against Stephanie Click. I urge the voters of HD 91 to strongly reject these tactics. Stephanie Click is an honorable, respected, and effective conservative serving Texas well.
I mean, yeah. Go ahead.
You never know how something like a story like this is going to play in a runoff. Then that's the thing about runoffs. Speaking generally about it, they are, there's nothing predictable about them. They are completely different from a primary or from a general election, because it's a scheduled election, but a lot of people aren't going out for it. And typically there's only one or two things on the ballot. So there's not a lot of people just turning out generally who don't know about your race. If people are turning out, they're turning out to vote for you, vote for your opponent, or vote against one of the other two people. Yeah. And it's a completely different way of looking at the election. And, just because somebody got, I've seen elections where somebody got 49 point some odd %.
Right.
And ended up losing the runoff.
Right.
Can
you scroll back up so that people can see where to find this?
Yeah, it's the TexasVoice.com.
Okay. Well, but there you go.
It'll be his top story.
Yeah.
If you just click, yeah.
Just want to make sure Mark gets all the credit in the world.
Absolutely. So that's an interesting story that's coming through right now. There's a bunch of stuff happening in the runoffs. We don't really know what's going to, and I mentioned that the crazy, things are happening. You never know what's going to happen. And that's just to say, you don't know how a story like this is going to impact a race. But it could very well influence enough voters to vote for or against, for Click or against Lowe, that it could be the difference.
And for some people, it will be not necessarily, like, I know some people's reasoning in some races is, I'm not voting for candidate A, I'm voting against candidate B. Like, maybe they don't have strong feelings about the first candidate A, but they definitely don't like candidate B. So, and while we're talking about this, Representative Frazier up in more or less the DFW area.
He's in Collin County.
Yeah.
He's kind of the reverse. He lives in Collin County and worked for Dallas PD.
Yeah, I think you can take this down now.
Oh, sure.
But I know that he pled guilty to some misdemeanors. You guys probably read about it. I don't want to get into all the little tiny details, but as part of a plea agreement, he had to pay, I think it was $4,000, and he had to do some other things. He was fired by the Dallas Police Department. That was very public. You can access that. This is not things that I know that nobody else knows. So we're having some very interesting runoffs, particularly as it concerns law enforcement officers. And yep, you want to move on. Okay, great. So
no, I was just trying to load it in the screen. Sorry to the people watching this live. Some of this happens while we're doing it. I was just loading up the next topic because the governor.
Yes.
So I'll take this down for the moment. But the governor.
You can move on.
Frederick Frazier's, is also in a runoff. And, he had stories. There's been ebbs and flows in his story too. He had what you just said. There was also something that kind of exonerated, or I don't exactly know. I'm not following it.
He pled guilty. I'm sorry. That is not correct. He pled no contest to the charges. DPD did fire him. And he did have.
I thought he resigned. I thought he was forced to resign.
I do not believe that is correct. Hang on one second. Let me do some pretty fast research.
But at a certain point, being asked to resign and being fired, or the points are saliently different. But yeah, those are different races where it's similar issues with people who are, ostensibly on kind of different sides of the Republican Party. So it'll be interesting to see if one plays, one doesn't, if it's an issue that kind of permeates through anything. But it's kind of specific. But also what's happening right now is to kind of touch on something we talked about previously.
He was dishonorably discharged from Dallas. This is according to WFAA.com. North Texas State Representative dishonorably discharged from Dallas Police Department, pleads no contest to misdemeanor charges. Representative Frederick Frazier R. McKinney pleads no contest to Class A misdemeanor charges of attempting to impersonate a public servant. And I could rehash all that for you, but like, I think that's enough said about that.
Yeah.
So with the we're having some very interesting results with the with law enforcement candidates, and man, dishonorably discharged. And I think in House District, I think it was 91, according to Mark McCaig, he didn't last long in that job as a law enforcement officer.
No, and apparently he just kind of burns the bridges of anywhere he goes. So I mean, if you go into the legislature, if you're working in the legislature, there's a certain cooperative element to getting legislation passed.
Right. And you need to be able to negotiate in good faith with other people. And no, if you don't believe that the candidate that you're thinking about voting for can negotiate in good faith with other people, particularly people of his own party, or her own party, then I would say maybe you want to rethink who you're going to vote for. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that people vote for people, but like, if I can't trust you, if I have questions about your character, chances are good you're not getting my vote.
Yeah.
So that's me.
So on the next topic we are talking about this week, we have kind of a retouch of something we covered a few weeks ago, where Biden came out with his Title IX changes that were basically forced school districts to change how they categorize genders and, effectively administrated Title IX. Governor Abbott sent out a directive to TEA to inform school districts and charter schools that they were not to implement those changes. Today, Wednesday, shortly before this came through, he sent out a press release that kind of had that put up right now, that goes over how that he made clear Texas will not comply with Biden's rewrite of Title IX, and that contradicts the original purpose and the spirit of the law, which is to support the advancement of women. Last week, I instructed the TEA to ignore Biden's illegal dictate on Title IX. Today, I'm instructing every public college and university in the state of Texas to do the same. The directive was sent specifically to all the university systems and community colleges in Texas. There had been some reporting that Texas A&M was going to implement the changes, and we're kind of ready to go, but Ken Paxton has filed a lawsuit against it, and A&M has now said that they're going to wait. This kind of also falls in line with, like, I think there's definitely some consternation between administrators at universities and the different government entities that are in charge of overseeing those groups, because the legislature came through and banned DEI. They keep seeing reports of dozens of staffers being fired from the university.
Right.
They're maybe trying to jump on this quickly to get it implemented so it's harder to undo. You kind of see some fights, but then you also see some agreement at the highest level. So when it comes to like these free speech protests, you have Jay Hartzell, who did a great job and has been commended. There was a letter authored by Cody Harris, signed by 50 other reps, that commended Hartzell on his handling of the illegal encampments under the guise of free speech at UT. So you have some, you see that at that level, but back on this issue, you see that Title IX is, might be something that like these trans athletes and certain administrations might be done differently. Also, I believe mentioning in here that part of the Title IX directive from Biden had to do with how interpersonal conflicts are administered by the university. So that's to say, if there's an accusation of sexual assault or harassment by one party, Texas has passed laws that help to guarantee that those students that are accused have some sort of due process right, or have the ability to be represented to a certain degree, and then how those cases can be administered by the university. But But
Sexual
part of what
assault in general, or what are you saying?
only as a matter of academic, like probation or whatever. There's been a lot of issues where somebody can be accused of sexual assault and then they aren't allowed to have any representation in any sort of student tribunal. There's a preponderance of the evidence standard, and people are just basically being kicked out based off only an accusation. And that's not to say that the accusation isn't valid, but that the consequences happen immediately, and then they kind of figure it out after the fact versus the other way around. And basically, Texas has a system in place that protects the accused due process rights that I think runs afoul to a certain degree the new Title IX directives from the Biden administration. So all that to say, there's a bunch to this. It's more than just trans athletes. There's a bunch of other issues that are at play here. And I mean, Paxton is leading the charge because it's Texas specific. Right. And hopefully his Solicitor General doesn't go in and just screw up like he did on that immigration case. But I don't have a lot of faith that we're gonna prevail on anything that Paxton's leading. I do think that the legislation was written well, and by that I mean it was written to withstand challenge. So it's going to be a situation of, can Paxton dunk the ball, or is he going to throw it out?
Well, we can't be the only state that feels this way. I mean, I didn't do the research on this, but we can't be the other state. But going back to the due process thing, like if you're in college, generally speaking, you are at least 18 years old, and therefore you are guaranteed all of your constitutional rights. So for a college to take that away, I get huge problems with that.
And there are major issues with it, because that's something that I remember hearing a news story about this when I was working in Iowa in 2014, and this was an issue that Biden spearheaded when he was vice president, of really trying to lock in a Title IX requirement for universities to basically just accept any accusation and basically kick out the accuser ASAP. And there are concerns with how that can be administered if that's as easy as it is to do that to somebody. Because oftentimes what happens is there's issues with an ex, and then it's just petty revenge. But most of the times they're probably actually substantive cases of sexual assault. So you have to balance the rights of the victim to have safe access to campus and not be haunted by someone who's attacked them, versus general due process rights for somebody who's been accused of malfeasance. And the general argument by the universities is that this isn't a constitutional right. There are rules within the institution, and you don't have to have it, because you're not being charged with anything, and you're only being deprived of an opportunity. But when they talk about government institutions, it gets a little fuzzier, and there's still a lot of open court cases when it comes to this. There's still a lot of legal questions that are very gray. So we can say, it should be one way or the other. You can have that argument, but there's also legal arguments that are far beyond my comprehension, or at least my knowledge at the moment, that are still playing out. And that's kind of like the two factors of this particular issue.
I understand that college is a privilege and you pay to go there, but if you are going to accuse someone of anything, due process should still be, even when you work for a company, if you are accused of whatever, you are given the opportunity to speak to this. And the idea that somebody could just accuse somebody of something and
nobody really.
I'm sorry, say that again.
No, it was sorry. Something happened on the back end.
Okay.
Yeah, but you need to accuse somebody and they just get kicked out of college. It's
so wrong. It's like, we're going to take your money and you're out, and like you don't get to say anything. And I would be really angry, but okay. I find that bogus. All right, so there we are with Title IX and due process and where and going forward, we are pausing on implementation.
Yeah. I did want to mention that there was the Texan had its fifth, I think it was its 50th or 60th anniversary this past week. Lots of stuff on Twitter, kind of talking about it. I just want to kind of praise them for a second because they do a really good job of reporting, and they make a case to report. They have institutional policies where they don't endorse. They don't think it's appropriate for media and ostensibly journalism. Journalists should endorse in political races, even their editorial boards, and they do a good job of presenting different facts. They recognize that different, journalists and authors are going to have an opinion and have bias, but they strive with their editorial standards to not make that bias known when reporting on a given piece. And I think they did a really good job. Connie Burton, former state senator, is the person who is the, I think, editor in charge or editor in chief, publisher. She started it, and Connie is a very, very nice person. When I was on my first political job, she was running for state senate, and I didn't live in her district, but I ended up being at a lot of the same events as her. And every time she'd see me at an event, she remembered my name. No, it was 10 years ago. She might not remember it now, but she remembered my name. She always made sure I got fed. Like, she was just a very kind person. When she had no reason to be. I didn't work for her or against her.
Right.
Was just kind of at the event, and she was just, as they kind of say in the churches I grew up in, being Jesus to people. And I always, found that to be just, it always stuck with me because, she doesn't necessarily always, whenever she was a legislator, I didn't always agree with how she'd vote or her opinions on a given things, but I've always respected her because I just know that she's a genuinely decent person.
She's a good human.
And this, all that to say is, one of their reporters, Brad Johnson, recently interviewed Mitch Little, who's the GOP nominee for, I actually don't know the district number, up in Denton County. He just beat Chronda Timish, who's the incumbent there. But he's, somebody who's also, we've talked about on the podcasts, or at least talked about his work, because he was one of Paxton's defense attorneys, both in the impeachment and in the criminal trial.
Oh, yes.
He's probably the best candidate that, like, traditionally qualified and, articulate candidate that Tim Dunn and his groups have ever gotten behind. He is, he did this interview with Brad Johnson, and I'll put it up real quick. But, it's, Mitch Little talks GOP primary people. You can find it on YouTube. And he makes a lot of the same, and all this stuff will be linked on the show description. I encourage people to, subscribe to the Texan and then to listen to this interview and whatever else, because Brad does a great job of interviewing him. I think people should go check it out. But what's interesting about the interview is that, Mitch, you can see that Mitch Little's very, very smart. He's a UT law grad. I think he went to A&M undergrad. He's obviously very successful defense attorney.
Right.
And I think that he said a lot of the right things about kind of, in some ways, moving forward as a party and whatever else. And I will hold him to it because I hope he follows that. But I think he has an opportunity.
Wait. You said moving forward as a party,
like cohesively. And
something
I don't expect to agree with Mitch Little on everything. I know already that I agree with him on a ton of stuff. Right. I think he has the opportunity to do a good job in his position, to actually go in there and fight for legislation. I think he actually has an opportunity to get legislation passed and to do well. And I think he can. I hope that he. I have hope that he'll do well. I don't have hope for some of the people that the Defend Texas Liberty got behind. I've seen them speak. They're, in some cases, particularly unintelligent, And I think that it will be, they're not going to get much done. Mitch Little is not that. He's very smart. And I think that he should be somebody that people look at, because I think he's going to be end up being the leader of that group, because the people in there now who are kind of the faces of stuff, they might be okay at press or getting on Newsmax, but they don't really have any substance behind their bills or behind their arguments. So I think Mitch Little is going to be the person to look at, and I think he has an opportunity to really get some change done. If assuming that the arguments he was making in the primary were in good faith, you can get to make some changes that will get done. So I'm not sure if you'd seen that video, but I
hadn't actually. I hadn't, but good for him. And if you having worked as Garrett has, I don't know, dozens and dozens of campaigns up and down the ballot. If you can't articulate your message, if you have a point you need to make and you can't boil it down to two sentences, you're losing, because then you're explaining, and if you're explaining, you're losing. So it's there's a lot to know about running for office and communication, and you need to be able. But a lawyer, not all of them, but most lawyers can be very articulate. Sometimes you need to. I know I worked for a lawyer who was an elected official. And so I had to get him to boil it down just a little more, condense it. Your points are good, but you're explaining too much. Just say your point. And then if you're asked, you can expand if it's an interview, or if you're standing up in front of a group of people, we call it the stump speech, or, and that's the basic points of why you're running. I'm running for this policy, this policy, this policy, and these personal reasons. And then there's the elevator pitch, which is how you pitch yourself on an elevator ride. So you get 2 minutes, right? So to do that. So, and lawyers are used to using many words. And so I
think it really depends on the context. Right, because if your person was a defense attorney, sometimes they're going to have a long closing, but they also need to be able to get a question out and get information across. If you're writing long contracts, you have to make sure you get every single detail in there, so your brain's going to be thinking about making sure you check off every single possible thing. Now, someone who's a defense attorney, and we saw how he did on his questioning with in the PACs, and he was excellent for the defense, and from a professional standpoint. Mm-hmm. So obviously, him and Busby were the reasons for that. They won that case. And I think that it is, so I feel like he's already demonstrated that he's not necessarily that. I have not met him. I do feel as if I did, he'd probably be, probably kind on first meeting. I feel like he'll do well in Austin. And that's not a dig. I'm not saying, he's just going to go whatever. I think, but generally, if you're an affable person, you're going to do well in Austin. And I think that he can be affable, and he'll fight for his side whenever he needs to. All of that to say is, a lot of these people that the scorecard has been sending for a long time have not been that, and they've been pretty poor. And I think Mitch Little has the opportunity to really kind of professionalize it. And I think that if you're kind of a quote unquote establishment Republican, you should be scared of him.
Yeah. I mean, speak your truth. So that's what it is. So yeah. All right. Well, we'll see what happens.
And if you wanted to come on the show and talk, we'd love to have him. I think it'd be a good interview. But I know some people had interactions with him during the primary that were less than positive, but primaries are bitter, acrimonious affairs. You kind of got to get over it and move on.
By nature, they're civil wars. That is why county parties,
they're not usually that civil.
But that's why county parties and the state party have no business getting involved in these.
And that's kind of the last thing I wanted to.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's the last thing I want to talk about. It's a good segue to the county chair races, not county chair, the state chair race is heating up. There are 5 candidates. Don't ask me to name them all.
They had a debate.
I mean, they're doing several. There will be one next Wednesday. That's being live streamed by Texas Values. We'll include the link in the description for this week and for next week's. Next Wednesday at noon, Texas Values has a candidate forum in the North Houston area that they'll be live streaming, and these debates are happening. Kind of a difference opinion. It seems like there's different factions in the party. We all know that. There's kind of the DTL crowd. There's a scorecard crowd. They're kind of different. They're mostly the same. You kind of have the TFRW. You have kind of the young Republicans. You have some people who are just longtime party members. You have some people, it's all sorts of different groups. You always have different factions. It's a group. All groups have factions. So beyond those dividing lines, it seems like the main issues are, should the party get involved in inter-party contests? And how important of all of it is raising money and getting Republicans elected in the general election? So basically, it's how much of the focus of the party chair should be on general elections versus on, party discipline or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's not their job.
Right. But that's your opinion. Other people disagree, and that seems to be what the fight of that's literally what the election is being turned into. That's what is the election going to be about? So that maybe, so we can let you get to it. I just want to make sure that all I'm saying is that that's what the election is going to be about.
So if you are chair of the state party, I mean, the first thing that I was told when I was a county chair, and God bless her, Sharon taught me a great deal, is that as chairman, whether it's county, whether it's state, whatever, you represent all the shades of red. Okay. So stay out of the primaries. That's why we don't, or we shouldn't take a position in the primaries, because as chairman or as a member of the board, say for RPT or, a state group or whatever, you have no business taking sides. You may support whoever you like in your personal life, but you may not make a public statement. And because we have, people who are fire engine red, the far right Republicans. And then we have the middle of the road, kind of Reagan Republicans. And then we have people who are, I don't know what the opposite of a blue dog is, Garrett, but we have those too. And so, but you have to represent, everybody. And you can't make exceptions. Well, you're not with me on social issues, but I'm with you on everything else. So shut up. And I've said it over and over and over again, if you believe in smaller, more efficient government, less taxes, then you are a Republican, and the leadership of the Republican Party should be glad to have you. And stay out of the primaries. I'm sorry. It drives me crazy.
I mean, regardless of your opinion on that issue, and I tend to agree with you, Andi. Regardless of your opinion on that, you have to be raising funds, because all of it is moot, right? It's kind of a chicken and egg question, and you have to have money to win elections.
Yep.
You have to win the elections and have majorities for any of the other things to make sense. So the rank order should be, we have to raise money because we have to win general elections. We have to recruit candidates in places where whatever. We have to do those functions of the party so that we can do any of the other questions. And I think that over the past few years, the people who've been voting and participating in the Republican Party organization itself, the actual organization stuff, have taken for granted our majorities and our dominance in elections. And I think that's just ultimately what it boils down to, is that we've taken it for granted. we also have to go out and win these elections. Like, how are we going to hold? We have to work to hold CD 20, so the Congressional District 23, regardless of whether Gonzalez wins or Herrera wins, right? Especially if Herrera wins, that's going to be a dogfight to keep the seat, let alone whatever else. You also had Henry Cuellar get indicted this week, who is he's kind of a blue dog Democrat. He's a pro-life, I believe he's a pro-life, pro border wall Democrat from South Texas. He's been there for a while. He was Secretary of State back in the early 2000s. Like, he is he's been in the Congress for a while, and he's got bribery charges relating to something to do with Azerbaijan and Egypt, or what, I don't know.
Did you see though his legislative staffer, and I don't know what their specific title was.
Yeah.
Is like,
apparently it's being reported
out saying, I'll give you, and it's like,
so I'm taking the same tact that Ted Cruz is, and I don't often say that, but he basically came out and said, listen, when it comes to stuff like this, Cuellar has been very, very critical of the Biden administration. I want to wait and see the evidence and get a little bit more information before I think about it. If that reporting is true, that his staffer is turning state's evidence, then yeah, I think he probably needs to resign. And I don't know. I probably need to figure out if he's already won his primary, what that means for the Democrats in his district, because one way or the other, that seat's going to be far more in play for Republicans. So that's all to say is we need money in the federal accounts so we can go after that seat. And the South Texas seat is gettable in the right circumstances. This might be the right circumstances. So we need to look at that ASAP, because that could be a flip in Texas.
Yeah. Bad.
Yeah.
Bad.
So what are we doing about that? Because we have to be raising funds, and you have to raise funds from the federal dollars, which means you're limited by how much you can raise at any given time. And you have to raise funds with state dollars for the state races, like Lopez down the border, or like I mentioned before, LaHood and Lahan and Bexar County, Chin and Meyer and Dallas. Any of these suburban seats in Houston or Harris Davila in Williamson County could be at risk. These seats we need to be defending these seats at the very least, right? Let alone going after some seats in these suburban areas and in South Texas.
And I would say to you, Garrett, like, some of these people have already won their primary, some of them have not. But by getting involved in the primary, you're cutting off dollars to the party. So if I'm supporting Jane Doe for state senate, and the RPT or my county comes out and says, no, Bob Smith, right? They're not getting any money from me. Like, no, that's why we stay out of the primary. You need to raise money. And by taking a position, publicly stating your opinion as the leader of the county or the state, people are going to hold back dollars. And like, no, support everybody. And when the primary is over, figure out where you're in danger, put your money behind those races. That's it.
Well, lots going on here in May as we gear up for the next big thing, which are the runoffs and the RPT convention in San Antonio, which are going to happen around the 23rd to the 25th. So that's going to be kind of the things that are percolating over the next few weeks. But we covered a lot today, Andi. I think we got more than enough. So thank y'all so much for joining us. Remember, like we said earlier, like, subscribe.
Smash those buttons.
Smash the notification button so you know exactly when we release a new episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening to us today. And we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
You've been listening to the Seeing Red podcast. It's always Texas politics and beyond. We present the facts and opinions. The Seeing Red podcast with your host, Andi Turner and Garrett Fools. Thank you, and tune in next week. And please do us a favor. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode.